Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're listening from, or watching from, or streaming from. I'm Kevin Impeccable Peck, your host, and this is the Chicken Box. Wow. Today's topic: Black people versus trust fund kids. That's going to be crazy. I mean, like, what is a trust fund kid? Matter of fact, what is a trust fund? Matter of fact, do you have a will? Matter of fact, are you using a GoFundMe to take care of your funeral? Matter of fact, we're talking about generational wealth. We're excited. We have a special guest today. But before we do, the Chicken Box is powered by the Afro American newspaper that's been, man, I guess they've been passing generational wealth for 6 generations, 130 years. Kudos to the birthday of the Afro American newspaper coming up. Dr. Draper will be joining us shortly. I'm Kevin Impeccable Peck again, representing our Gen Xers. Now, I don't know what generation talked about wills, talked about trust, but today we're going to get into it. Today I have a special guest, and I'm going to call her a family member because she actually is fifth generation in the Afro-American newspaper. I don't know if I call her Esquire, attorney at law, but I call her Cuzzo when we're not live on this thing. But if everybody just give a warm welcome for Portia Wood, all the way from the left coast. Portia Wood, welcome to the Chicken Box.
Hello, cousin. It's okay. Even on live, I don't deny my family. Hi.
Absolutely. You're looking radiant as ever.
Thank you.
Always glad to see you. Generational wealth attorney. Welcome to the I wanted to say to the stage, but welcome to the show, Portia. And I am excited. I've been thinking about this topic to the point that I've been putting my coins away to get my own trust together for my family. Of course, since I'm on the left coast for this particular week and broadcasting live from right near the Trumpet Awards out here in LA, I'm going to get a chance to maybe come to your office. But you have been the champion and the cheerleader in the African American community. I know there's been others, but your voice has been very loud about generational wealth. And just the fact that without an estate plan, you are really setting yourself up. I mean, I'm on your website now. It's just talking about, which actually is the Wood Legal Group. It just says we're closing the gap. Your mother and daughter estate planning, which kudos to your mother for going back, later in her life to get her law degree, which was always amazing to me. And I'm very, very happy that just to see a mother and daughter, which is another family thing, but just closing the gap to help us protect our assets and a lot of things that we don't even know about. So welcome, Portia. I didn't even say, I didn't give you a chance.
No, it's all good, but thank you so much. I mean, it's true, right? I am not the only person who is talking about this, but any opportunity that I can get to sound the alarms for our community, I'm happy to take it. What most people don't realize is that we are in a state of emergency for Black wealth. And we can talk about it as the racial wealth gap and all of these other things. But in 2017, there was a study that was published that said by 2053, the median net worth for African-American families was set to hit zero. And that's not that far away, right? When that study came out, that was not that far away. That was like 30 plus years, right? 2017 to 2053. It's not a long time. And that was then, right? We just went through COVID, or still going through COVID. But in 2020 alone, 1 in 555 African Americans died as a result of COVID-19, which has severely accelerated this timeline. And so what was maybe 20 plus years is now probably about 10 to really protect what we already have. And it's not about accumulation. It's not about let's go out and invest. Those are all great conversations to be had, and people should be doing that. But we have about 10 years to get people's financial foundation.
Jeffries?
Not for me. I see you here.
Right. I'm like, wait a minute,
You're like, what happened? No, but honestly, for 70% of African Americans have zero estate planning at all, which means we are building our family and financial houses on quicksand. And so we've got really about 10 years to get people's financial foundations secure. And if we don't, that road to zero wealth or zero median net worth is going to be irreversible. There is no substitute to a paid off house that you receive or to an inherited house, right? The benefits that come with that. There are no substitutes for having a leg up, for avoiding court interference. There's no substitute for that. And once you need it, it's too late to get it. So I know we're going to dive into all of this, but I just wanted to say thank you so much for having me on the Chicken Box today to come and talk about Black people versus trust funds, because we believe that all Black people should be trust fund kids. I can't hear you now, boo. You on mute.
I'm on mute. You know what I'm saying? We have a mug. We have a mug at the Afro Mall that says you're on mute. Anyway, if you just tuned in, this is generational wealth attorney Portia Wood over here on the West Coast, originally from Baltimore, and she's going to share. We have been talking about wealth building this month at the Afro. We're Still Here edition has come out. It's coming out about just we got to get our money right, y'all. We have to get our plan right, and a lot of times we don't have a plan at all. But if you've never heard of the Chicken Box and you're Portia Wood's friends and followers, that is a term in Baltimore, Maryland, where it's 4 wings and fries. I'm sure out here on the West Coast they have something close to it where you get some 4 wings and fries, but we the Chicken Box. But here, this is where we dispel myths and stereotypes in the African American community, and we try to inform and bring something that either you should be thinking about, or you need to be thinking about, or maybe you're just thinking about. So you get a chance to get up on the box, speak your truth. Do I have to agree with you all the time? No, but the fact is, you have to speak your truth, and that's the problem in our community. We get upset when somebody speaks a different path, a different idea, and instead of saying, okay, that's another way to look at it, or we can agree to disagree, we get upset. I don't want to take the vax. I want to take the vax. I don't like you because you don't want to take the vax. I don't like you because you don't want to. So all of that's the Chicken Box, y'all. And we're going to get right into it. Again, we're being powered by the 130-year-old Afro-American newspaper, a media company that's been informing, educating, and inspiring. Go to afro.com when you get a chance. Get a subscription. For less than $2 Uber Eats, you can have it digitally delivered to any of your smart devices, or if you want the Legacy Edition, when you get certain beautiful pages that you can frame in your home of historic moments for $100 a year. A small donation. We are Black-owned, Black-operated. We're not a Black front owned by another who try to just come into our community so they can get some revenue. Anyway, back to Black people versus, yes, trust fund kid. Let's get right to it. What is a trust fund kid? Let alone a Black trust fund kid, Portia. You're on now.
It's like you on now. Well, I mean, like I said, so a trust fund is essentially a legal document that is set up. Easiest way to think about it is like a corporation, right? You, while you're alive, I'll use you as an example, Kevin. You may create a trust for all the assets that you're building. If you own a house, you're going to put that in your trust. If you have bank accounts, you're going to put it in the name of your trust. If you have investment accounts, brokerage accounts, you're going to put those things in the name of your trust. And you as the trustee are going to manage those assets, right? Same way you do now. You're still going to use your, if it's a living revocable trust, you're still going to use your social security number. You'll file taxes the same way. But the protections that come in is if you get bonked over the head and you're in a coma, who is legally authorized to manage your affairs? Who makes sure that your mortgage is still paid? Who gets access to your bank accounts to pay your bills or to take care of you? Your trustee or your successor trustee is going to be empowered legally to do that, which will allow them to avoid a court process and ask a judge for permission. Then when you pass on, right, because none of us are getting out of this life alive, that's an eventuality for all of us. When you pass on, you've created a structure that says how your beneficiaries are going to inherit from you, what they inherit and how, which can again avoid the probate process, which is the court process for transferring assets when we don't have a plan or when we only have a will, you avoid that and you are able to get as much of your assets to your beneficiaries as possible. Depending on the type of trust you create, because I'm a big proponent for multi-generational trust planning, the type of trust, if you do that kind, then your trust creates a sub-trust for your children, which can provide them with divorce protection, creditor protection. And when we're thinking about creditors, I know we'll go into it, but it might be back child support. It might be student loan debt. It might be judgments against them. It might be just protection against lawsuits in the future. Maybe they're contractors or surgeons. Whoever they are, you can give some additional protections on your assets to make sure that they stay. And if you're in a blended family, you can make sure that none of the children in that blended family get unintentionally disinherited by having a very specific plan. So we like to say Black trust fund kids are kids who are planned for, right?
Yeah, I wanted to get to the other trust fund kids
first. Yeah, but kids, trust fund kids in general are people who have been planned for. Someone thought about them in the beginning, and not just where you're going to go to school or how are we going to pay for the food on the table and your education, but how are your grandchildren going to continue to survive and thrive from the work that I've done today?
Absolutely. So they're not just the spoiled brats that you see jet setting to exotic places. I mean, we think of them, some of them, things I was reading on the internet is they're privileged, they're spoiled, they're just living off of their rich parents. You're saying no.
This is the media's fault. And I will say this, the media has portrayed trust fund children as just as you've described, these spoiled brats. And immediately what happens, particularly in our community, is we see that and we say, oh, that's not us. That's not for us. And we immediately exclude ourselves from the conversation of trust funds. But the reality is that is a portrayal. That is not actually life, right? Yes, are there some people that have been able to amass incredible fortunes where they can sort of do whatever they want? Sure. But the reality, the most people that I see who are creating trust funds for their children and their grandchildren really just want to protect them. They want to make sure that as much as they can, as much as what they have makes it to their kids. Right now, the probate process, which is a court process that is 100% avoidable, right? That probate process is costing American families $2 billion annually. $2 billion with a B. And it is 100% avoidable by having the right estate plan for your asset level and for your family structure. And when we separate ourselves and say trusts aren't for us because I don't have enough money, or trusts aren't for us because I don't want those spoiled brat kids, or trusts aren't for me, whatever it is, we are putting ourselves back into that lump that's slated to lose. And it's a great media portrayal, right? Because we separate ourselves. And so, what my mother and I have been doing, and why we get on our soapboxes in the chicken box and talk about this emergency, it's because we have to reframe this narrative, because we're slated to lose. Only 13%, Kevin, only 13% of college-educated African Americans are getting $10,000 or more to the next generation. 13%. Wow. Which means 87% of college-educated African Americans are not even passing $10,000 to the next generation. And it is not because we do not have things. That is a myth. There is more wealth in the Black community today to pass to the next generation than ever before in the history of this country. And so the fact that we are failing at the generation game is because we separate ourselves out from the ideas and the tools that would help us build generational wealth. And if we're not
right there. Put a period right there.
Period.
Period with an exclamation mark. We have been separating ourselves. More wealth than ever. I like to say sometimes we're selfish as a generation, and that we are only thinking about this life we want to live right here, these clothes we want to have, this car we want to drive, all these things that don't pass on to anybody else. And they just, they make you feel good for a second. But the wealthy, the trust is all in front of you a lot of times. You never even see it. It's usually just a little teeny word on your tax returns, right? You'll skip over it. Or like I was doing a W-9 the other day. For those who work for yourselves and sometimes do business with other people, they ask you for a W-9. It says, are you an individual, corporation, or a trust, right? And so you will see this word trust, and you will probably skip over this word trust because those who know how to use these wealth tools, portion, like you said, and that obviously is only 13% of us who are really not even are using the trust.
So 13% are just getting $10,000.
Oh,
When we think about people who have effective and comprehensive estate plans, it is less than 1% in the African American community. 70% of us have nothing at all. And of that 30% that remains, the majority of them do not have the right estate plan for their asset levels, their family structure, and their goals. And so we are looking at a fraction of people in our community who actually have comprehensive planning that can help protect their assets intergenerationally. When I say it's a state of emergency, I do not mean this. I'm not saying this as flippantly. Like this, we have to do this right now. Because if Big Mama's house ends up in a court probate and there are 3 children on that house, and one of them, let's say, got caught up in the war on drugs, right, which we know is a war on Black and brown and impoverished communities. If someone got caught up in the war on drugs, let's say they were incarcerated for 60 days, which is uncommon, but let's say they were incarcerated for 60 days. They've lost their job. They've probably lost their housing. They got behind on their child support in just 60 days, right? And that's a hole that's incredibly hard to climb out of because there's interest and all these other things added. If they inherit a third of a house, the state can attach to that house and force a sale, which now removes an asset that could have built wealth generationally for a family from them just because it wasn't planned for properly, just because one person had an issue. And so people don't even have the right plans for their family structures, for who their beneficiaries are, for what happens to all of their assets. So it's not that 13% of us have the right estate plan. No, it's much, much smaller than that.
Goodness gracious. Man, you just tuned in. This is the Chicken Box. Black people versus trust fund kids, okay? Or Black trust fund kids, because we're going to talk about what we need in our community. And we need to wake up to this particular fact. 1% is the lowest percent. That means we are failing, not because we want to fail, we're failing because of lack of knowledge. And so hopefully by today, if you have never thought about an estate plan, if you're mad at Junebug because Junebug got caught up in the war and messed up Big Mama's house, and you didn't even know what happened, and you wonder why it got sent to the state, to the probate court, and you wonder why all of these investors are buying Big Mama's house because it went down to the courthouse because you have no control of it. It's just because we did not have the information to pass along so that we could protect ourselves. Chime in, y'all. Thank you, Jewel, Byron. Anybody else, just put in there where you're from if you're awake. If not, you'll see it on the stream and you'll be talking to yourself if you put it in the chat, but you can still put it in the chat. So I think, has Dr. Draper joined us yet? Let's see. Dr. Draper, welcome. Welcome to the Chicken Box.
Thank you. Hello.
Hello.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to 2 of my favorite people.
It's a family affair, in case you guys didn't know. The Afro-American newspaper is a family business. We have 2 generations on. Our CEO, Dr. Draper, who is 4th generation, and Portia and myself are 5th generation. And this is the Chicken Box. And we're talking a broad overview to get your mind and your family right, because only 1% are going to have done it right so far. And before, I'm sure Portia's life is over, that number will be way past 1% if she has something to do with it. Dr. Draper, were you backstage just taking it all in?
I absolutely was. And so I was just curious, Portia, I think a lot of times people hear this, and as you said, they think it's not for them because they don't have enough money or whatever. Give us the basic, the 1, 2, 3. How does a person get started? Let's say they know nothing about trusts, nothing about estates. They may own a home or have some other tangible assets. Maybe it's not Big Mama's house. This is their first home and they have children or not. I mean, what's step 1? What do people need to do first?
So honestly, step 1 is like, start getting the information. We have a free resource library on our website, which has a ton of information and videos that come out that talk about these different pieces. just to get the balls rolling, right? Seek out information, because no two plans are the same. Anyone that's like, I can, we run these plans, they can't. Everybody's family is different, right? And everybody's wishes are different. Their asset levels are different. There are some commonalities. Everyone over the age of 18 needs 3 basic components right now today, right? The first is going to be their property power of attorney. And in different states, it's called different things. So it might be a uniform statutory power of attorney or a durable power of attorney. But effectively, what it does is, if you are in that car accident, or if you are in the hospital for some period of time, or if you have dementia and you're not able to handle your own financial and property affairs, someone is legally authorized to step up and do it for you. Lots of times people go, oh, that's my spouse, girl, or, my parents are still alive, they can do it. But the reality is, if you have a bank account that doesn't have your spouse's name on it, your spouse does not get access to that bank account just because you're impaired. And the reason being, because you didn't give it to them. If you're over the age of 18, nobody is automatically your fiduciary and gets to make decisions for you or sign your name. Right? If you haven't given that power to someone, the only entity that can give that power then is the court. And it's a conservatorship or guardianship proceeding. For those of you who remember the big hoopla that we had with Britney Spears recently, that was over a conservatorship, because she had a very public mental breakdown about 13 years ago, and her father took control by the court of her finances as well as her personhood, right? Whether she could enter contracts, whether she could get married, whether she could have more children. All of those decisions were determined by her conservator, because she was deemed to not have capacity. If she had a power of attorney in place, it would have listed who she wanted, and she would not have had to go to court and try to get her father removed for the amount of years that she fought in court to do that. That's number one. Number two is your healthcare directives. Who decides your medical decisions? It's very similar to the first one, right? If you don't do it, the court is the one who decides who gets to make those decisions. And it's the same process. It's a conservatorship or guardianship proceeding. Those first two things have zero to do with how much money you have. In fact, it has nothing to do with how much money you have. It has everything to do with the fact that you are a legal adult in the United States. And you, as a legal adult, must direct who would step up if you can't make decisions. Right? The third one does have to do with how much money you have, and it's your distribution plan. So when you're looking at how do I distribute what I have after I'm gone, you're thinking about who your family is, so your family structure, your asset levels, and your goals. That will determine whether you need a will or a trust or multiple trusts or foundations or on and on and on, right? That's where the amount of money you have in your family structure comes into play. But everybody over the age of 18 or emancipated minors need those 3 things as their foundational basis. And then as you build on top of that estate plan.
Okay, so do you need an attorney for those first 2?
You don't need an attorney for those first 2. You do want some guidance. You need to know how to answer the questions and what powers you're giving away. I don't ever recommend signing legal documents without at least some advice from an attorney.
I agree. We can plan that money for that getaway and that vacation and everything else, but leave everybody with their hands in the air looking for what to do when you become in a place where you can't do it for yourself. This is the Chicken Box. If you just tuned in, we are talking generational wealth. This has been a month all about wealth and wealth planning and just getting our mind focused and stop skipping over money like it's just, like we'll get to it. You know what I mean? Or stop saying, man, I'm just making it, I'm poor. You begin to speak all of these negative things about money, and money is basically, I'm going to go to the Bible. It says it answers all problems. I had to look at it again when I looked at the Bible. So wait a minute, money answers all problems? So wait a minute, we need some money, y'all. We need to get some money. Now they said love of money. Okay, this is where they get it mixed up. Will mess you up. So you can't love money more than your God, but it's definitely important to have in your family and in your community so that you can do. And those who have are here so that we can help those who are working on getting it, and not always saying, have not, because everybody should be working on giving it out. If you want to lay around and not do anything and you're capable of doing something, then that's on you. But other than that, this is a great conversation. The questions, I'm sure, are pouring in. We've all seen these cases that you talked about a brother and sister who lost a house or failed to plan, or someone on their deathbed who didn't have a directive and they don't know, what to do. And then the conversation will come up maybe basically at maybe a dinner or maybe a conversation, but then where do we go from there, right? And so is that resource library, Portia, a great start for anybody? Okay, so that's the resource.
Yeah, I mean, the resource library is an incredible start for anyone, right? It starts to get the information out there. We have like a chart that's like the 6 things that you need to think about inside of your estate plan. And then we have reports that go deeper, the studies that I cite about Black wealth. And when I talk about why this is an emergency, those studies are in there. So if people want to read more about how they came to this determination about where we are with Black wealth, all of that is in there. Guardianship planning, if you've got minor kids. I mean, Tony, you asked several questions about, if someone has a house or if someone has minor kids, what are their considerations? And honestly, those considerations are very different. We do a whole presentation specifically on estate planning with minor kids, because that conversation is very different than the conversation that I would have with, say, you about how do you plan your estate. Because when you have minors, you not only have to think about how do you get your assets to them, but you also have to think about who manages them on their behalf, who has the ability and capability to do it, to manage the finances, to do what you want it to do, who has the capability of taking them in and raising them as well. And what do you want them to know? Because if you are gone and your children are minors, there's still things that you want them to know. And the only thing left to guide your kids is your estate. So you have to be more restrictive and more conservative in your planning to sort of use that as the vehicle to keep guiding your children forward. And if I may, Kevin, just briefly, what people don't realize is sort of this silent emergency that's been happening. More than 146,000 children between April of 2020 and June of 2021 in the United States have been orphaned as a result of COVID-19. And 65% of those children are in minority communities. And when we go back to the numbers of the fact that 70% of African Americans don't have any estate planning, it means they had zero plan for what happens for those children. So what are the economics that are available? Who's taking care of them? For those kids, the courts are in charge of them and will be until they're at least 18 years old. And that has an incredible impact on their access and ability to really, truly grow in our society. We did a whole TikTok on it recently. And so, if anyone's interested, they can look at it there. But we have to take agency. So when we have minor kids, we have to make a plan for them, because they cannot make a plan for themselves.
Man, that makes anybody think, right? Because you always think you're going to work, right? And you're going to come home. And you're not sure that you're going to come home, even though you think you're going to come home. And so you're not thinking that if you don't come home and you have minor kids, what happens? Like, what automatically happens? Okay, let's say you are remarried, right? And you're a blended family, and you not expect, you pass unexpectedly with no directives, no anything, and then does their legal parent automatically do the kids automatically go to the other parent if the other parent is alive?
There are a lot of ifs in that.
I mean,
but in theory, yes. In theory, yes. If there is another legal guardian or a legal parent that is around that hasn't been stripped of their parental rights, then yes, they would likely go there. The standard is the best interest of the child, and so it would really depend on what that relationship has been. Consistent, but that would be the first sort of priority. Be the other.
So when you say strips, so you know how in some since 50% of Since 50% of African Americans have gone through a divorce or experienced a divorce, so that means in their divorce proceedings, if they have joint legal custody, then it will probably go. But if the other person has 100% legal custody, then you say that would be the challenging.
So then it would be more of a maybe, right? They'd still be first priority as the other parent, but if they don't have joint legal or they only have visitation, then the question might be why. Perhaps they're not in a position or capable of being a full parent, and so then that might not be in the best interest. But it would be up to the judge to decide at that point.
Gotcha.
The other issue that comes in with blended families that most people don't think about, and this varies by jurisdiction because some states are community property states and others are marital property states, et cetera. But if you are in a blended union and you each have biological children from prior unions, but all of your assets are joint, right? You own a joint house and you're investing together in X, Y, and Z. You're in a first to die situation. Whichever one of you dies first, that's whose kids get disinherited. And most people don't know that, right? So if, the father dies and the mother lives, which statistically speaking is what happens, sorry, Kevin, but women tend to live significantly longer than the men in their lives by about 10 to 12 years. And so the wife would inherit, pretty much all of the community property, but the children, the biological children of the husband are not legal inheritors of the wife because they are not legally connected to that wife. They're not her children by adoption or by blood. And so when the wife dies, only her children would get the bulk of the entirety of the estate, not the children of the husband. They have been unintentionally disinherited by mere virtue of the fact that the husband died first. And so you have to have a plan when you're in a blended family, when there's one kid or multiple kids or whatever that are not of that current union. You must have a plan because it will not just fall to the kids, regardless of how much you love them. It's not how the law works. And so, when you mentioned where do the kids go from a guardianship perspective, that's one aspect. But the other aspect is what happens from a financial perspective. And that's a whole nother.
Then it looks like the movie when they come into the room and they read it, and it's the one kid who got everything, and the other kid that's upset and he wants to kill the other kid before they even get out the.
So that is actually different. That's different because if they're doing a reading of the will, you adults get to decide where your assets go. And let's be clear: while people think about, oh, I'm going to inherit from my parents, nobody just gets to inherit from you. Right? Like there is a default plan to say where your stuff goes based on the state. But the reality is our kids don't get our stuff just by virtue of the fact that they're our kids.
Oh, right. Well, in case they were just mean and nasty. They could be mean and nasty, right? They could be mean and nasty kids.
And I can say, I'm going to give it to the dog, Kevin. I could give my entire estate to the dog and be like, forget these kids. The dog. I could give it to church. I could give it to charity. I could divide it up however I want because the reality is it's mine. And one of the powerful things about multi-generational trust planning is that it's mine. So when I think about giving, the assets that I'm accumulating to my son, I'm thinking about, well, what are the restrictions? If I were to die tomorrow, hopefully not, but if I were, what are the things that I need him to know before I think he can manage this? So I've put restrictions in there that say he needs to take a financial literacy course and successfully complete it before he can become his own trustee at 35. Why? Because I have zero idea what the financial markets will look like in 31 years, right? 12 years ago, nobody thought Bitcoin was a thing, and now it's worth $45,000. So the reality is I have no idea what it's going to look like, but I don't need to because I'll be dead. But he needs to know. And how do I ensure that he's going to at least have a baseline of that information? I wrote it in the plan, and I put that restriction. I also understand the history of housing and real estate in this country, particularly with Black people. We are at about a 43% homeownership rate for African-American families right now. And it is so hard to get into a home. I think we're over 24% in prices from last year to this year to date. And it's so difficult for African-Americans to get into new home ownership right now. So knowing that and knowing the history of redlining and subprime mortgages and unequal distribution of the GI Bill, the fact that I own real estate is amazing, right? So I'm not going to let my son mess it up. I've put a restriction on sale in my estate plan. He can't sell it. And I can do that because I'm giving it to you. I'm giving it to you for your use and enjoyment and for your love inside of this trust. But you're going to take it with the restrictions I've given, or you won't take it at all. And it'll sit there and wait for your kids. Take
Man,
it.
so hold on.
When you talk about the power
go into the conversation. We're talking about generational wealth. We're talking about Black trust fund kids. We have generational wealth attorney Portia Wood on right now with us, and she is dropping those gems right now. And she's even waking up. I'm gonna have to send this to our family, our little family thread, because I think we're all the way behind. Not everybody, but I think that even as a family, and I think if we look inside of our families, but sometimes our families are the last people to get it, right? You're saying something to them, but then that's just Portia talking again, or that's just Kevin talking, or that's just Dr. Draper talking. No, we're talking statistically about what is factually happening. These numbers are not numbers, it says fact, numbers don't lie. I forgot the other thing. People lie, numbers don't. Okay, so the numbers are right in our face. And so what are we going to do? What are our steps to ensure? And I love the trust of how you said it spells it out. Okay, you can't use my cologne, my Gucci cologne, but you can use this. This cologne has to sit here.
I mean, that level of minutia is probably not going to be. When we think about preservation of assets, you asked, right? Like, and Antonio, you asked, right? What happens with that house? You've got this one house and you've got 3 kids, and perhaps one of them got caught up in the war, right? A war on drugs. And perhaps they have someone else got an education. And so they've got student loan debt, and you don't want to impact their income-based repayment, because just because you left them this house doesn't mean they're making more money, right? And so what do? Well, if you leave them in a multi-generational trust, that one house, you can leave that house with different instructions. One with asset protection, right? So somebody else manages it on their behalf. They still get the benefit, but now it can't be attached by their creditors, or now it doesn't impact their student loan repayment. And so now you've preserved that house in a way that it wouldn't if it had just gone to them. But let's add in some restrictions, right? Because how do 3 people share one house? Well, maybe you say that they can't live there unless they're paying fair market rent. Well, now you've eliminated that argument, right? Because it's in the plan. They don't have to discuss it. And let's say you can't sell it. So now we can't have that argument either, to say, I want my money, because we can't sell it. We don't have the authority to do so. Well, how do we get money out of that house? How do we use it? Oh, you put in your plan that they can leverage it. So in my plan, my son can leverage my real estate up to 75% of the fair rental value. So if you can get $2,000 a month on that property, your mortgage cannot be more than 75% of that $2,000 on a monthly basis. That is your formula for how much money you can get out of this house every 10, 15, 20 years. I've put in that 25% to ensure he doesn't over leverage, right? He doesn't put the house underwater, doesn't take out more money than it's worth. I've also ensured that there's money that stays aside for maintenance and repairs that are definitely going to come up, right? And I've said, here's how you take out $100,000 or $300,000 or $500,000 as property grows over the years. That formula will continue for his kids as well, and for their kids. So I've given them a structure that says, A, you can't sell it, can't get rid of it, but here's how you can take money out of it. Now you take that money out. Guess what a loan is versus a sale? You sell that house, you pay capital gains on that house. You're paying taxes, a lot of taxes. You take a mortgage on that house, because it is a loan, it is a tax-free distribution, which means you pay 0 taxes, you get 100% of it, and a tenant is paying back that money. That is wealth. That is why one property, no matter where it is located in the country, I don't care where it is located, you may hate the neighborhood, one property has the ability to perpetuate wealth in a family for generations. Because if you can take that one property and leverage it, that cash that comes out tax-free, you can put on another property as your down payment. Now you can compete in the market with other kids who have cash. You do that, and then you leverage again. And you don't buy single family homes when you leverage the second time. Okay. You buy multi-units, but you leverage it. And that one piece of property, we've protected it from sale. We've protected it from the beneficiaries' creditors. We've protected it from divorce of the beneficiaries. And we've given them the structure for how to leverage it. And once you've given somebody the structure and the protection, all it will do is perpetuate wealth. because we, fortunately, at least at this time, live in a stable economy. And what we know about money, and what you guys have been teaching on the Chicken Box for this whole month, right, is about financial literacy. What we know about money is that if you have a stable economy, all you need is protection and time, and compounding interest will do its thing. So thankfully, we live in a stable economy. The protection is the estate plan and the restrictions that you put on these assets. And then all you need is time. And no matter how much you start with, it will multiply. And there's your recipe for generational wealth. And 70% of us don't have anything at all in preparation for what happens, which is an eventuality for all of us.
The 11th wonder of the world, compound interest. I'm glad
Love
you brought
interest. Love it.
I'm glad you brought it in. This is the Chicken Box. We're talking about Black trust fund kids with generational wealth attorney Portia Wood. I won't call you doctor. I'll make you a doctor when you come on here because you drop it so much.
Doctor of law. I'm a doctor of jurisprudence, so that's fair.
Yes, absolutely. So you're dropping so many gems on us. So what went up in my mind, and even though I know, but it's somebody else who may not know. So who manages this trust? The trustee? I mean,
so while you're alive, right? And again, there's
once I'm dead, right? Like you were saying, what
you pick. So you can pick family members, you can pick professionals, and it really just depends, right? If your kids are minors, personally, I picked a combination between a professional and a family member, because it's a lot of work, right? It's not easy. It's a lot of work. And I want someone who's looking at the markets all the time, who has a baseline knowledge in how these things work, to be the one who's managing my son's assets, particularly because he's 4, right? But I also need a family member who knows me and understands my intentions and will be able to then make sure that these things are being used the way I want. When interviewing professionals, I had a lot of questions, right? Because it's about my value system. Because what is left of me, aside from whatever I've written down in these videos, right, is my estate plan. It says my values. And so when I was picking a professional, I asked questions like, do you guys invest in private prisons? If you do, you're not the right people for me. I don't want my money invested in private prisons. It might make me money, but the reality is I don't want my son thinking that it is more important to make money than it is the social issues. So I'm not going to allow for my money to be used in that way. And so on and so forth. And so you have to look at, this is why it's very personal. You have to look at, what is your value system? What are the things that you want your family to continue to know and to feel? If I were to pass away young and my son graduates from high school and he's top of his class, he gets a little bit of money unrestricted to do whatever he wants with. And, I've written a letter that says, I think you should travel. And because travel is a great part of, a young person's education and experience in the world. I've, written out that if he gets a full ride to college or some other secondary or higher education or certificate program, that he gets another chunk of money that's divided up over the course of the program to encourage him to keep that scholarship, right? So that he can do whatever he wants with. How else can I show you that I'm proud of you if I'm not there? How else can I say, great job? If I'm not there, I can use my estate to do it, right? Because everything else is all locked up. And how do I know that I have the resources to be able to do that? I have life insurance. If I should die, I know, or when I should die, I should say, right? I know how much money will be inside of my trust in liquid capital, not just the assets that I'm saving for, right? The things that I'm putting in my retirement or the things that I'm putting in my brokerage accounts or my real estate. I know that there is a fixed amount of money that will come off of my life insurance into my trust for the management and protection of my child. And if we have minor kids and you don't have life insurance, and I don't mean the life insurance they give you at your job, because that's 1 to 2 years of salary. That is not an economic replacement for you. That's 2 years. And now what does your family do after that? I mean, take your annual salary and multiply it by 20. That's how much life insurance you should likely have if you have minor kids, because that is replacing your economic contribution to your household should you never get another raise or make any more money. Then your family can at least operate the same way you do right now. Let me give you one more thing. You ready for some math, Kevin? You make $100,000 a year. You ready? $100,000.
Let me get my calculator, right? Go ahead.
You make $100,000 a year. You got
Okay.
minor times 20, $2 million, right? Okay. That $2 million goes into your trust. You've now restricted it because we've talked about how you grow money. I'm getting in, right? Restrictions in time. That money's invested. Average rate of return has been what, 8%? Call it 8%. We'll go conservative. We'll call it 5.
Call it 5. Okay.
You get a 5% interest return on your $2 million invested. How much money have you just generated in interest income annually?
About
$100,000.
Yeah,
Just in interest income without ever
10% is 200,000. Right.
Without ever touching the principal of that $2 million, you've just recreated your economic value to your household for life. Not 20 years, for life. And because of the interest,
trust with life insurance, right?
Correct. It is a combination. Estate planning is not one thing. These things are not done in a vacuum. When you are talking about finances here, right? These not done in a vacuum. Your estate plan is the foundation of your financial house. And all of these other pieces are the walls and the structures and the windows. They're built on top of it. But life insurance is right there in the foundation. Right. Because how do you ensure that there's money for taxes, for burial, for caring for family members? How do you make sure that if one spouse dies, the other spouse doesn't have to deplete all of the retirement, that there's economics available? And let's take it one step further, Kevin. This is the Rockefeller method. You ready?
I'm ready. I don't know who else is ready. Hold on, Dolores. Thank you for tuning in. Jewel, our Jules from the jewelry store. Chippy, my dad, Eric. How you doing, Dad? Look. I'm ready. I think they're ready. This is Black People versus Trust Funds on the Afro-American Newspapers platform. 130-year birthday. They have definitely figured out some generational wealth and passed it down. And so I am ready for the Rockefeller method. I hope you guys are. Let's go. Where's my pen?
Same scenario. All right, we're going to take that same scenario. That $2 million in life insurance pays into the trust. We've created now, at 5%, $100,000 a year. Now, if you can't take care of my kid $100,000 a year, you're doing something wrong. I picked the wrong guardians. But the reality is that the market returns 8 to 10, right? So we're actually going to return significantly more than what is actually needed. And so what do we do with that? We put it back into the trust, into the principal, and keep it growing. But there's also a provision inside of my trust that every new baby born in my family line, is going to get a life insurance policy that's paid for by my trust. So Emerson already has one that I bought when he was a baby. Why? Because it's never cheaper and easier to get than when you have a 100-year life expectancy, right? 87-year life expectancy. And so he has a policy that cash compounds inside of it, right? We talk about compounding interest. But if I then use my trust to buy his children life insurance at $1 million policy, which is, probably going to be $400 a month at their age, it'll cash compound. Guess what? When they pass away, guess where that money goes? Back into my trust. So now I have a reinfusion of cash to keep supporting every successive generation that is structured inside of my plan. How do you make sure that assets remain in perpetuity? You make sure that cash can keep coming in. Family is love, but family is a business, right? Our elders are the CEOs. And when they transition, the next generation has to come up and step up. And what happens in businesses, or at least properly structured businesses, is that there is key man insurance on the top. Because the business knows that if the top person is gone and they're the rainmaker, or they're the person who's doing it, we're going to have to spend money to find the next person. So how do we hedge against that? We put insurance on them, key man life insurance on them, so that there's a cash infusion to get the next people ready to step up. What happens in our community is we don't leverage life insurance. In fact, the pushback that I get from people is like, that's like making me worth more dead than I'm alive.
Hello.
I was like, die, right? Like, you don't have the fountain of youth that's going to keep you alive forever. Because if you do, can you please share it with me? But I don't think we found that yet. And if we haven't found it, then you're going to die eventually. Do you not have insurance on your phone and your car and all of these other things in case you lose them, your house, renter's insurance? Because it would be detrimental to your family if all of your stuff burned up in a fire. But you don't think it would be detrimental to your family if you
That's
died?
on the new bill. Okay, just like you have to have homeowners insurance, you now have to have life insurance. And I am now in the politics of the of the digital space. I'm running for insurance commissioner, and I'm going to start this new law that you have to have life insurance in order to work. Boom. How about that? That would change. That would be a game changer, wouldn't it?
I mean,
That would.
Kevin, let's put it this way. You want to run for insurance commissioner, I will support you. But just imagine if every Black baby had life insurance from the time that they were born. And I'm not talking about term insurance. They won't even give term insurance to babies, right? Because term insurance doesn't pay out. I'm talking about whole life insurance that cash compounds, that creates an economic vehicle that by the time they're 18, 20, 25, there is money that they can borrow against tax-free to go out and start a business, pay for education, buy a home. You've created an economic vehicle for them just by planning, right? Because you got 20 years of compounding interest. That can be pretty substantial for a child. And if they leave it in, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
Portia, Dr. Draper.
Let's imagine how quickly policies would change around, and I'm going to go here, sorry, but around the police brutality and the things that we've seen in this country. If the insurance commission had to pay out every single time somebody was harmed by the police in that way, the insurance commission has the largest lobby in the nation. Second to, I believe, just the NRA. Insurance actually might be first over the NRA. They're neck and neck. If we wanted to see real change, one of the ways that we could do it is leveraging our wealth and our power. The only way to have wealth and economics and power is to create a structure. If there's no green and nobody cares because we are not prepared and planning for these types of things, then we don't have a say. We can make the moral argument, but the moral argument isn't working. We've got to make sure that we are also protecting and building our family economics to have a strong seat at the table.
Absolutely. And this is we're running on time. This is a chicken box. We got about 7 minutes. We're ready to get back on the box. You have dropped so much wisdom, so many gems. Thank you, everybody who's tuning in. I just wanted to say to that fact, 8 years ago, by accident, in first class, I was eye hustling somebody's book that said bank on yourself, right? And I was like, what in the world is bank on yourself? So of course, I began to ask them questions about bank on yourself. And so I sought out a bank on yourself, and it was exactly what you said, Portia. It was because I had term. I was like, I'm gonna get a $2 million worth of term. It's the cheapest insurance, and that's what I don't want food with no whole life. But then when I really understood what the wealthy have been doing, and I started to I had a certain amount of money that I said I'm gonna put every month into my whole life policy, right? Paid up edition policy that has been earning me interest since those 8 years when I first started to do it. You like our last guest, Alicia Wilson, last week was saying, you gotta just be diligent for a little while so that you can build up your little nest egg, right? But now, like you said, I can take a loan against my own money, so I'm banking on myself instead of giving all my money to the credit cards, the car people, just because I deferred a couple things for a few years, and I can see it. It clicked all the way in. I don't know who else it clicked in for this morning, and I'm on the box. This will be my final comment. I don't know who else it clicked in for with the trust, with the perpetual insurance, because I was like, wait a minute, how are all these professionals going to keep getting paid to handle my trust? But you've already set it up in the insurance policies and the money that you can loan. Here's the clue, y'all. It's some sites out there for your crypto that you can do the same thing. You can take a loan against your crypto, but that's a whole
different conversation, and be very careful about that because crypto is a volatile market and you do not want a margin call.
That margin, right?
That part.
Right,
but it's important one of the things that you were saying is like perpetual banking, and it's true. This concept of infinite banking and being able to bank on yourself. we also, as a community, we have to remember that the banking system has been incredibly abusive towards our community, whether that's in, the subprime mortgages of 2008, where they used the churches for these wealth building seminars and then only offered our community subprime mortgages, even when we were overly qualified for the mortgage for a regular rate. They wouldn't give it to us. And in the crash of 2008, the African American community lost about 50% of its wealth. And we have never recovered from that. Everybody else got bailed out, but we have never recovered from that. And if you look at the report that came out on March 10th, I think it was the Washington Post that actually posted it, but Wells Fargo denied 53%, of the African American applications for refinance on properties that we already own. That means they denied us the opportunity to pull the equity out of our homes or reduce our interest rates during 2020 of the pandemic. Compared to all other lenders, which was in the 70s for approvals, Wells Fargo was at 47%. If we don't have to go through those abusive systems anymore because we have created our own banking structures within our families and our community, they can't prey on us. If you don't need to go there to refinance your property and you can go to your life insurance or to your trust fund instead, then you don't have to worry about what their interest rates are anymore, or whether or not you qualify under their system, or if your home is in a Black neighborhood, so they're not going to give you money. You don't have to worry about that anymore. And that's why these things are so important right now. Again, we're in a state of emergency.
I'm gonna let Dr. Draper get in because this is the fifth generation jumping in, and we could talk probably for a day. I think I'm gonna come around your house, Portia, later tonight.
But I think, Portia, you raised a good point. We also have to be discerning about where we put our money. So this is not the first time that Wells Fargo has been on the hot seat, yet they didn't lose many depositors. People did not pull their money out. And so we need to be discerning about who we invest with. I know of a church, for example, that had a Wells Fargo loan that they paid. It had a balloon at the end. They paid it faithfully. They paid more than they were supposed to. The balloon came due this year, a couple of months ago. Wells Fargo would not refinance it. Nope, we want all the money, even though they've been paying. And so people have to be discerning about where you invest your money. Our producer gave me this fact that backs up what you said. I'm going to read it. That according to the Institute for Policy Studies, the wealth of the Forbes 400 billionaires is equal to the wealth of the entire African American population. Let that sink in for a minute. 400 folk have more money than the entire African American population. So we have to be discerning. We have to, and I like what you said. I'm on the box, and I'm gonna get off in a minute. That we have, we can decide where we leave our assets. It doesn't have to be our children. It could be. It doesn't have to be our grandchildren. It can be whoever we want. But it needs to be somebody who we think, is going to, that our wishes will be, exercised there. So I want to say this about Portia Wood. Portia Wood is a sought after speaker. She's been on MSNBC. I saw that link was just there. She's been on Good Morning America. People are really perking up on this whole generational wealth conversation. And I want to say to those who are watching and listening today, you don't have to be wealthy by the world standards to start a wealth plan. Too often we hesitate because we say, well, I only have $100. Well, be the best steward you can over that $100 and make sure it doesn't go to 95 and 85. And before you know it, you can't account for the 100. And so we can learn how to build it with some patience and some discipline and some things that we are great consumers, great consumers of certain products, right? Some we need, some we don't need as much of, but we're great consumers. And there's some industries that would not survive if it wasn't for the African American community. So I'm gonna get off the box and say, let's start someplace.
All right. Well, both of our jewels have joined us. Yep. Thank you, everybody who's been jumping in. We have resources. And if you came in late, the great thing about technology now is you can, as soon as it ends, you can go back and watch the beginning because it was some very important information that was dropped. And Portia and Dr. Draper, when you said this about the banks, what I learned about banks, they have something called BOI. Look it up. It's called Bank owned insurance. These banks, but they're only allowed to, I think, invest up to 25% of their assets. They have millions or billions invested in these whole life bank owned insurance policies. So the like I said, the clues are there. All right. The wisdom is coming. The question is, what action will you take? Final words, Portia Wood. Oh man, this has been a pleasure. It's almost it's like you don't want it to stop. but but
And
final,
Kevin, and before Portia gives the final remarks, this has well, it does have something to do. I want to make sure that everybody knows that the Afro is celebrating 130 years in August, right? 130 years, and a lot of times you hear something number like that, and you say, "Oh, well, that's old school." Well, you can see we're not old school; we're new school. But we do have three events this year that we want people to put on their calendar. This Saturday, if you're in the Baltimore area, we have a high tea. I think it might be. I'm not sure if it's sold out or not, but go to afro.com.
I tell you, don't have to be bougie. Just come, okay? Anyway, keep
And
going.
then in DC on June 26th, we are honoring Dorothy Gilliam. We're honoring Dr. Kathy Hughes. We're honoring Denise Rollard Barnes. That's on June 26th. And then August 13th is the big 130th anniversary gala celebration. We'll let you know more about that as we get closer, but mark those dates. Thank you. All right, Portia, you get the last word on the box.
Ooh, so many words. I will echo one of the things that Kevin just said. And as an action step, I would say start having the family conversations. This is not a conversation that should happen in a silo and in a box. It can, but one of the things that we've realized is particularly in our community is that it's so valuable to have the multi-generational conversation, to make sure everybody in your family is on the same baseline knowledge of sort of process, what things are. Because we have to remember in the African-American community that the reason we don't know much about this is because we used to be the wealth that was passed in other people's estate plans. We used to be the property that people would write down and pass inside of their trusts. It wasn't built for us. We don't have this knowledge, not because we're stupid or anything like that. It's because it was actively kept away from us. Right now, we have an opportunity to learn more. And as we learn more, we must do more. And we cannot keep that in a box and in a silo. We've got to take it to our family members. We have 10 years. You guys, we have 10 years. This is a state of emergency. If we can't get more people covered, we will lose what we have. Families in the United States are already losing $2 billion annually in a probate process across this country that is 100% avoidable. What could we do? What could the next generation do if they didn't have to start over from zero and a negative? What could they accomplish if they could stand on our shoulders, or we could stand on the shoulders of those who came before us and not fall down from the bottom and have to dig our way back up in a society that is still moving forward at exponential rates, right? We have to do something now. And that is a family conversation. That's how we can work collaboratively. If you still have a parent or a grandparent alive, pull your cousins, pull your siblings, pull your other family members, and make sure there's a life insurance policy on them. It's not going to be cheap because they're old, right? Because they're older and their life expectancy is shorter and their health may not be great, but then pay that amount. Because what happens is then you're not having a fish fry. You're not having a GoFundMe to try to make sure that that family member is honored. You're not trying to figure out how do we keep the house and pay the taxes. It comes in, right? You've got an infusion of cash that you can then use to get the life insurance policies on everyone else in the next generation. But you've got to start somewhere. Someone has to make the tough decision to take our heads out of the sand and actually make a concerted, comprehensive plan. And that's on us, right? We have the power. And right now, the majority of us are giving away our economic power by just not having a plan. So that would be my final.
That was just like boom. That's a mic drop moment by not having a plan. Take our face out the sand. I know when you pick it up, You're going to be coughing and choking, and you're still going to be rubbing your eyes because it's sand in your face. But guess what? If you just jump in the shower, and the shower will be the plan, right? And wash it off, you will be able to see clearly, and we can move into the future. Until next week, God willing. I always say that, okay? And that's not a joke, because some people that I knew last week have now passed on, right? They have gone to another place. And don't let that be you before you get your plan in place. Goodbye, everybody. Dr. Wood, Dr. Draper, thank you for again for this just poignant conversation and this needed conversation. And please, everybody out there watching, hit the share button. Share it with somebody else. Don't be selfish and just suck up all the information. Share it with somebody else, because guess what? It's going to change somebody's life. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.